April 1945. The war in Europe was nearing its end. Somewhere in California, at Camp Underhill Proving Ground, a crew of 5 was trying to start a vehicle, a tank. 86 tons of steel, nearly 5 meters wide, with 2 sets of tracks, because one pair simply wasn't enough. While the crew was fiddling with the startup, the war ended. Literally. This tank never fired a single shot at the enemy. And then the United States Army lost it. For 27 years, simply lost, the heaviest combat vehicle the country had ever built. It was found by accident, rusting in the bushes, like garden tools left behind after moving. That's where my question arises. How was that even possible? And the longer I dug into it, the more interesting it became. The official version is simple and elegant. The United States created the T28 as a specialized battering ram to breach the fortifications of the Siegfried Line, the German defensive belt along Germany's western border with its concrete pillboxes, dragon's teeth, and anti-tank ditches. The vehicle received frontal armor 305 millimeters thick. Against it, the famous German 88 was like a pea shooter, a powerful 105 millimeter T5E1 gun. The concept is clear. You simply drive up to a pillbox, and the pillbox ceases to exist. Elegant, logical, and about half of it, untrue. That's where the official version begins to fall apart. Because when you start digging through the documents, Charles Clements of the Ordnance Department or the Aberdeen Proving Ground test reports, several inconvenient facts come to light. Let's start with the name. Over the years, this machine was officially called different things. First, the T28, heavy tank. Then someone in Washington decided that since it had no turret, it was a self-propelled gun. It was renamed the T95. Then it was changed back to T28, but now as the super heavy tank. Military bureaucracy argued for years about what exactly they had built. That's beautifully called a classification debate. In reality, people couldn't agree on what kind of beast they had in their yard. Now pay attention. The T5E1 gun, the only truly fearsome weapon on this machine, was rigidly fixed into the frontal hull plate. No turret at all. The horizontal traverse angle, minus 10 degrees one way, plus 10 the other, 20 degrees total. This means, to aim the gun at a target, you have to turn the entire vehicle. 86 tons, at 13 kilometers per hour. That's your entire tactical flexibility. For a long time, I didn't understand why. A turret would have added weight, that's clear, but how much? I leafed through Richard Ogorkovich's Technology of Tanks, one of the few people who systematically analyzed the engineering compromises of super heavy vehicles. And here's what came out. By 1944, the designers were already working at the very limit of what the transmission could handle. Any added weight, and the Ford GAF V8 engines simply couldn't cope. 500 horsepower is fine for a 30-ton Sherman. For 86 tons, it's, well, you get it, right? Like hitching a racing bike to a freight car. But the most interesting part is the tracks. To make the T28 transportable by rail at all, the designers came up with a trick. The 2 outer track assemblies were detachable, literally unbolted, fastened together, and towed behind as a separate trailer. The vehicle would switch from 4 tracks to 2, narrowing from nearly 5 meters to 3.5. This would fit into the standard railway loading gauge. A beautiful solution, even elegant. But there's a nuance. According to the calculations of the military engineers themselves, this operation took 2.5 hours. In combat conditions. Under fire, in the dark, in the mud. 2.5 hours is not removing the tracks. It's a full-scale engineering operation. You read the test reports and realize, this tank was designed for ideal conditions that don't exist in real warfare. And then it gets worse. Frankly, when I first saw the logistics data, I didn't believe it. I double-checked using several sources, including Steven Zaloga's U.S. Army Tank Crewman and Aberdeen Proving Ground materials. So, even in its stripped-down configuration, the T28 exerted ground pressure that would destroy standard French and Belgian bridges of 1944. Most of them were built back in the 19th century and designed for horse-drawn traffic. And here, 86 tons. Narrow European roads, ditches on the sides, the first turn. and the vehicle simply slides into a ditch from which nothing in the Allied arsenal could pull it out. But that's not all. And now pay attention, this is rarely mentioned. All Allied railway flat cars intended for transporting equipment to France and Germany had a maximum load capacity of about 60 tons. The T28 weighed 86, with the outer tracks removed, about 65. So the flat car had to be specially reinforced or alternative transport methods found, every single time. What do we get in reality? A tank that couldn't be transported by rail in its standard configuration, couldn't cross most bridges, couldn't be rapidly deployed from transport mode to combat mode, and which moved at the speed of a fast-walking pedestrian, 13 kilometers per hour on the highway, significantly less off-road. Although wait, let's look at what others were doing. In the book by Thomas Jentz and Hilary Doyle, Panzer Tracts, perhaps the most exhaustive study of German armored vehicles in existence, there's a detailed analysis of the Maus, Porsche's German super-heavy tank. 188 tons, also failed to catch up with the war, also broke bridges, also built for a specific concept, breaching fortified lines, and that concept also became obsolete before the machine was ready. But there's a fundamental difference in philosophy. The Germans built the Maus from the logic. We will make such a powerful weapon that the enemy will be powerless against it. The Americans built the T28 from the logic. We need a tool for a specific task, to crack the Siegfried Line. And that specific task disappeared before the tool was ready. In March 1945, Allied troops crossed the Rhine. The Siegfried Line became history. The T28 was about 6 months too late. You look at this and think, the Soviet answer to the same problem, breaching fortified positions, looked completely different. The IS-2, with its 122mm gun weighing 46 tons, managed to see combat, breach more than one fortified line, and reach Berlin. The Soviet concept, sufficiently powerful yet mobile, proved more practical than the American absolute protection. This doesn't mean the IS was technically superior. It means the task was formulated more accurately. And the final stroke of this story, they built 2 prototypes. This is part 1 of 2. One burned up on the proving ground in the 50s under unclear circumstances. The second was simply forgotten. In 1969, at Fort Belvoir, a technician literally stumbled upon something metallic in the bushes at the edge of the range. Beneath a layer of rust and vegetation, the T28, the heaviest combat vehicle ever built in the United States. It had been standing in the bushes for 27 years. No one was looking for it. Today, it's at the Armor and Cavalry Museum in Fort Moore, Georgia. Restored, impressive, and utterly useless in the sense it was originally intended. You know what amazes me most about this story? Not the technical miscalculations, not the logistical absurdities, but the fact that smart, experienced engineers and military men, people with real combat experience, could become so deeply engrossed in solving a problem that they failed to notice the problem itself had already changed. The T28 is not a monument to engineering thought, but to engineering inertia. When the objective is clear, resources are allocated and the machine is set in motion. Stopping is almost impossible, even if the war has moved in a different direction. Write in the comments, what do you think? Did the T28 ever have a chance to change the course of the war? Had it reached the front in time? Or would logistics have killed it before German anti-tank artillery did? I'm genuinely interested in your opinion. This is part 2 of 2.